I wasn't supposed to be home that night. Chicago had been the plan. We were in the final stages of closing a $10 million deal with investors, and I had flown out early that morning to deliver the final pitch. I'd rehearsed it for weeks, packed everything meticulously, including a custom-designed prop case filled with ultra-realistic fake cash meant to impress the old money types, and had planned to stay overnight before returning in the morning. But then came the storm. The meeting was abruptly canceled, the entire city grinding to a halt as whiteout conditions blanketed the skyline. I caught the last train back out of Union Station and drove the rest of the way to the lake house. Snow was coming down so hard that even the wipers couldn't keep up. By the time I turned into the long driveway, it felt like I was the only soul left in the world. The lake house stood there, half covered in snow, its roofline drooping with frost. Everything looked untouched, peaceful, except for one thing: footprints. There in the yard, clear as day, were large boot prints stamped into the fresh snow. They started near the street, wound around my car's usual spot, and disappeared around the far side of the house, toward the back door we never used. I left the engine running and stepped outside, staring down at the tracks like they might rearrange themselves if I just blinked hard enough. The prints weren't mine. Too far apart, too heavy. And they weren't Brooke's either. Her snow boots left a small zigzag pattern. These were deep, wide-set. Definitely a man's. I followed the tracks partway, but stopped when they veered behind the house and vanished around the deck. I didn't want to assume the worst. Could have been a neighbor. Could have been delivery. Could have been maintenance, though I hadn't scheduled anything. Could have been nothing. Inside, the house was warm. Too warm. The fire in the living room was still burning low, glowing orange in the hearth like someone had just stoked it. My boots left wet prints across the tile as I stepped inside, letting the door shut behind me. There was a faint smell in the air, cologne, maybe? Not mine. Something sweet, sharp. Not unpleasant, but foreign. I dropped my overnight bag and called out, "Brooke!" There was no answer. My eyes landed on something on the carpet, near the stairs. A black leather glove. Men's. One glove. Just left there like someone forgot it while in a hurry. "Brooke!" I said again, louder this time. Then I heard it. Footsteps upstairs. Then the soft creak of a door opening. A moment later, Brooke appeared at the top of the stairs, wrapped in her robe, towel draped around her shoulders, her hair damp and clinging to her neck. Her expression didn't match the moment. No surprise, no confusion, just a small, tight smile. "You're back early," she said, descending the stairs. "Storm hit early. Everything's shut down," I replied. "Meetings rescheduled." She reached the last step and walked right past the glove without glancing at it. "You should have called," she said, stepping into the kitchen. "I would have made something." "I figured I'd beat the worst of the snow," I said, still standing near the front door. "It's getting bad out there." She nodded, opening the fridge, still in that robe. No pants, no shoes. "Matt from next door came by earlier. Said he was worried about the heating system. He offered to check the vents, see if the pipes were freezing." I kept my eyes on her. "That right?" She turned her back to me and poured a glass of water. "Yeah." I let him in for a few minutes. He didn't stay long. My eyes drifted back to the glove on the floor. "Did he lose something?" I asked, nodding toward it. Brooke turned and glanced at the glove like she was seeing it for the first time. "Oh, maybe. I'll text him." Her tone was off. I couldn't place it, not quite casual, not quite nervous. Too measured. But I was exhausted, and the drive had wrung me out. I opened my bag and pulled out the case. Matte black, clean lines, looking every bit like it held the millions it mimicked. I set it on the table. "Prototype," I said. "Part of the presentation. The investors loved it." She looked it over, her eyes unreadable. "Looks real," she said. "It's fake," I replied. "Bills are just props. But the stitching's exact. Watermarked. I had it custom-made. Trackers stitched into the bottom just in case. You mind keeping it safe tonight? I'll lock it up in the morning." She nodded, picked it up by the handle. "Sure." That was it. No questions. No curiosity. Just, "Sure." We watched a little TV that night. Nothing special. She sat close to me on the couch, but not close enough to feel like things were normal. I was half asleep before the second episode ended, so I kissed her forehead and went upstairs, telling myself the strange air between us was just in my head. But in the morning, she was gone. I woke up to an empty bed. That wasn't unusual. Brooke often got up early to jog or make coffee, but there was no sound downstairs. No clatter of pans, no hum of the dishwasher. Just silence. I pulled on a sweatshirt and went down barefoot. Her slippers were gone from the hallway. No boots near the door. No phone on the charger. The robe she'd worn the night before was gone, along with every coat she owned. Closet drawers, empty. The case was gone, too. I checked the office, bathroom, garage. Nothing. On the kitchen table was a breakfast tray. Toast untouched, coffee cold, and a single note, folded in half and propped against the mug like it had been placed there on purpose. I stared at it for a long time before picking it up. 3 words, inked in thick black marker, block letters that looked more like a label than a message. You deserved this. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stood there in my own kitchen, holding a note from my wife, a woman I thought I knew, and realizing everything I believed about my life had just shifted under my feet. Not stolen. Not broken into. She'd taken it. All of it. The case, her things, her phone, her story. And left me with 3 words I didn't understand. Yet, the worst part wasn't the note. It was the silence that followed. After Brooke vanished with the case and that message on the breakfast tray, the house fell into an eerie quiet. I sat in the kitchen for hours, just staring at the folded paper like it might suddenly rewrite itself. You deserved this. I couldn't make sense of it. Deserved what exactly? Her leaving? The theft? The betrayal? At first, I told myself there had to be some other explanation. Maybe she'd panicked. Maybe something triggered a breakdown. Maybe I had missed signs that she wasn't doing well. But then I started looking, really looking, and I realized the truth had been right in front of me for months. I just hadn't wanted to see it. That morning, after I checked every room and confirmed she was gone for real, I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. The first thing I did was pull up my calendar. The one Brooke used to sync with mine all the time. She'd stopped doing that a while ago. At the time, I thought it was an accident or just a sign we were getting too busy. But now it felt deliberate. I clicked through old dates, digging through the past few months. There were blocks of time where she'd marked herself as away with friends. Vague events that she never expanded on. She'd said it was a retreat, some kind of spa getaway with people from her yoga class. Except I never met any of them. Not once. Not a name. Not even a selfie to prove she'd gone. Then there were the business dinners she told me about. The client meetings that always ran too long. The evenings she came home tired but glowing, brushing off my questions with kisses and promises of stories, tomorrow. But tomorrow never came, and I never pushed. Looking back, I remembered other little moments that didn't add up. Times she asked about my work in a way that didn't feel like curiosity, it felt pointed. Once, maybe 2 months ago, she asked about the deal I was pitching in Chicago. She wanted to know how the investor contracts were written, how long they stayed confidential. At the time, I'd found it charming, her interest in what I did. But now it felt like recon. I opened my email and scrolled back through flagged messages. One caught my eye, an alert from our joint bank account 2 weeks ago, a withdrawal just under the daily limit. I'd meant to ask her about it but forgot. She said she was buying furniture for the guest room. I walked to the guest room and stood there, still bare. Not a single new thing in it. I stared at the empty floor, then at the perfectly made bed, and finally back at the bare walls. That's when the truth really hit me. This wasn't impulsive. Brooke didn't just crack one morning and run off in a panic. She planned this. She calculated it. And she got away with it. At least for now. Later that afternoon, I sat on the couch and replayed a memory that had nagged me for weeks but I'd brushed off at the time. One night, maybe a month ago, she was in the kitchen with her phone on speaker. I came in mid-conversation, and a man's voice was saying something about next Thursday. When I asked who it was, she smiled and said, Just a coworker. Tom. You don't know him. Tom. That name stuck with me. Not because of the call, but because of something earlier. Tom was the realtor who helped us buy the lake house. The guy who lingered too long at showings. The one who laughed at all Brooke's jokes like he was auditioning for something. I remembered his eyes, the way they tracked her, not me, during our walkthroughs. I chalked it up to charisma. Now, I wasn't so sure. I opened the home network and logged into our security system. Months ago, I'd installed a full exterior cam setup, front, sides, back. One of them, mounted near the garage, had gone offline a few weeks earlier. Right after Brooke told me she'd had a problem connecting it to the app. I never followed up. But the camera had its own SD card. I grabbed a step ladder, pulled it down, and slid the card into my laptop. It was all there. Every motion event from the past few weeks. Most were harmless: snowfall, neighborhood cats, our mailman. But then I found the one that stopped me cold. Timestamp: 2:48 a.m. There she was. Brooke, wearing her winter coat, dragging a suitcase in one hand and the presentation case in the other. She didn't hesitate. She didn't sneak. She just walked out like it was any other night. Like she'd done it before. A man waited at the end of the driveway. Not just any man. Tom. He stepped out of a car I didn't recognize. A black SUV, tinted windows, engine running. He opened the back, helped her load the case, then the suitcase, then wrapped an arm around her like this was a victory, not a theft. She turned and looked back at the house just once, and then they drove away. No hurry, no panic, just gone. I paused the video full screen and stared at Tom's face. It was clearer than I expected. Same guy, same smug confidence. Realtor turned accomplice. The rage that built in my chest wasn't the explosive kind. It was slow, measured, cold. The kind that simmers just under the surface. Because now I wasn't just dealing with a cheating wife. I was dealing with a betrayal that ran deep. Brooke knew what that case represented. She knew it wasn't just some flashy gimmick. She knew it held value, not monetary maybe, but symbolic. She knew the investors I'd just signed off with had seen it, touched it, trusted it. And she knew exactly what taking it would mean. So why leave the note? That was what gnawed at me. You deserved this. What did I do? Work too much? Miss a few dinners? Trust her? Or maybe it wasn't about me at all. Maybe that message wasn't a confession. It was a wee *P*N. A final twist of the knife. But here's the thing. What Brooke didn't know was that the case she stole wasn't just a showpiece. It was bait. There's a moment when denial dies. For me, it happened somewhere between hitting pause on the security footage and realizing I'd watched my wife walk out of our home, with a suitcase in one hand and a case of fake millions in the other, like she was clocking out of a job she never applied for. And the man with her? That wasn't some coworker or concerned neighbor checking the pipes. That was Tom, the realtor, the guy who once offered to help install a ceiling fan just because he was in the area. The same guy who used to linger in the kitchen a little too long during house tours, talking about backsplash tiles while giving Brooke the kind of smile that wasn't meant for married women. I'd written it all off at the time. I was busy, distracted, prepping pitches, building the business, planning futures. I thought my marriage was solid. I thought Brooke was loyal. I thought wrong. I watched the footage again, this time slowly, frame by frame. Brooke steps out the back door at 2:48 a.m., wearing her long wool coat, the one she only ever wore to nice dinners or real estate closings. Her hair was tied back, tight and neat. No hesitation in her steps. No looking around nervously. She wasn't sneaking. She was leaving. Tom stepped out of the SUV like it was routine. They didn't speak in the video, but I could see how close they stood, how easily they moved together. This wasn't their first time coordinating. He took the suitcase from her, placed it gently in the trunk, then turned to help her with the presentation case. The way he looked at it, he didn't open it, didn't shake it. He just cradled it like he already knew what was inside. That told me everything. He was in on it. He knew about the case. He knew what it was supposed to represent. And he believed it was real. They stood side by side after the trunk closed. She leaned into him slightly, His hand went to the small of her back. Then they got in the car and drove off into the snow like a couple heading out for a weekend getaway. Except what they took with them wasn't real money. It was something better. It was bait. Back when I had the case built, I didn't just commission it for showmanship. I had it customized by a company that specializes in secure presentation materials, stuff used in training simulations, undercover operations, movie props. Each bill was printed to look and feel like the real thing, down to the microtext and watermarks. But they weren't currency. And beneath the velvet lining in the base of the case, a small, flat GPS tracker. Battery life, 2 weeks. Range, global. Signal, encrypted and constantly uploading to the cloud. It was meant to be a backup plan in case a competitor ever tried something shady during a pitch, or if the case ever got stolen. Which apparently it had. I opened the tracking dashboard from my laptop. The device pinged from a location about 30 miles south of the house. A small roadside motel. Off the highway. The kind of place with flickering neon and hourly rates. Real classy, Tom. I zoomed in. Pine View Motel, room 214. I didn't drive down there. Didn't charge through the snow in some cinematic chase scene. That's not how I operate. I deal in strategy, leverage, structure. I wasn't about to throw that away just because my wife turned out to be someone I didn't recognize anymore. Instead, I clicked the incident alert button built into the tracker's interface. Within seconds, 3 things happened. An automated theft report was sent to my legal team, pre-filled with the incident details and camera footage timestamps. A digital notice went out to the investors involved in the Chicago deal, informing them that sensitive proprietary materials had been unlawfully removed from my custody. Not real money, just demonstration property, but still a breach. The system logged GPS data and uploaded it to the cloud, attaching it to a file labeled Incident 214, confirmed theft. I didn't need revenge. I needed record keeping, and I wanted this handled cleanly. Then I made a single call. It was to an attorney friend of mine named Victor, the kind of guy who wears bespoke suits and knows every clause in a corporate NDA like it's bedtime poetry. I briefed him on everything, what the case contained, the footage, Brooks' role, Tom's involvement. Victor didn't hesitate. You want to press charges? No, I said. I want the file public. I want it on record. They can keep the circus. I just want the receipts. He laughed. You always did play the long game. Later that evening, Victor sent me a confirmation. He had filed a theft report with local authorities, attached all footage, documents, and metadata. It wouldn't result in jail time, not with fake bills, but it was still legally significant. Especially given the context. Attempted fraud, breach of fiduciary trust, potential civil liabilities. The cherry on top. Since Tom was a licensed realtor, and Brooke worked at a bank, both were now implicated in a breach of professional ethics. At minimum, their reputations were about to implode. I shut my laptop and sat back in the silence. The snow was still falling outside, the kind of slow, drifting flakes that blanket the world in quiet. But inside my head, things were moving fast. The footage hadn't just shown me the betrayal. It had answered the question I didn't want to ask. This wasn't just about cheating. It was about premeditation. About Brooke watching me build something from scratch, only to decide she wanted the shortcut. Tom saw the opportunity and latched on. And I'd handed them both exactly what they were looking for. Or so they thought. Because if they believed they stole millions, they'd act like it. They'd try to use it, leverage it, hide it, and every step they took would leave a trail. One I could follow. I stood up from the desk, walked over to the fireplace, and dropped the note Brooke left into the flames. You deserved this. Maybe I did. For trusting too easily. For believing a quiet house meant a peaceful one. But what Brooke and Tom didn't realize was this. I always planned 2 moves ahead, and they had just played right into it. They thought they'd gotten away with it. That's the part that kept looping in my head like a bad rerun. Brooke and Tom actually believed they had pulled off the perfect heist, walked out of our house in the middle of the night with a fake $10 million presentation case in tow, into a snowstorm and into whatever fantasy they'd been cooking up behind my back. But what they didn't know, what they never even considered, is that I'm not the kind of guy who gets taken off guard more than once. The case they took wasn't just a prop. It was a test. And they failed it spectacularly. By mid-morning the next day, I had more than just footage and a GPS ping. I had documentation. My legal team, now looped in thanks to the tracker's emergency alert system, had compiled everything into a tidy, timestamp packet. Surveillance screensh *TS. Corresponding phone records. Even footage from traffic cams showing Tom's car heading south down the interstate just before dawn. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was building a paper trail. That morning, I did something that surprised even me. I went out for breakfast. There's a diner just outside of town that makes the best black coffee you can imagine. I sat there for almost an hour, watching the snow melt into sludge outside the window while flipping through the file on my tablet. I was calm, methodical, because that's what Brooke and Tom had forgotten about me. My strength wasn't in how loudly I reacted. It was in how quietly I built the next move. The GPS tracker still showed the case at the Pineview Motel. Room 214. Still there, unmoving. If I had to guess, they were probably still asleep, or arguing, or trying to figure out how to use what they thought they had. Maybe Brooke was pretending she felt bad. Maybe Tom was pacing the floor, worried someone had spotted them. That's the thing about stolen treasure. It only feels valuable if no one's looking for it. But I was looking, and so were the police. I got a call from Victor around 11:20 a.m. They sent a unit out about half an hour ago, he said. Dispatched on the grounds of probable cause, with supporting documentation from the theft report. No arrests yet, but the officer said they'd notify us if they found anything suspicious. Which they will, I said. He chuckled. You're awfully calm for a guy whose wife just ran off with a con artist and a briefcase of fake cash. She wasn't my wife, I said. Not really, not for a while. There was a pause on the other end. Then Victor said, You sure you don't want to press full charges? No, I said again. I want something better. I want a record. I want them to explain this for the rest of their lives. An hour later, I got the photo. Victor forwarded it from his assistant. It came with a short message. Thought you'd like a visual. I opened the image on my phone and just stared. There, in front of a snow-dusted patrol car, was Tom. Face down on the hood, hands behind his back. 2 officers stood behind him, one holding cuffs, the other securing a small black case that had been opened on the pavement. Inside, the fake bills gleamed like real ones in the daylight. Next to the cruiser stood Brooke. Her hair was a mess, wind-blown and tangled. She wasn't cuffed, but she might as well have been. Her robe was gone, replaced by jeans and a jacket that looked hastily thrown on. Her face was pale, eyes wide and darting as if still trying to piece together how this had all unraveled so quickly. And on the ground, half covered in slush, was the note she'd left me. You deserved this. She must have kept it with her. A trophy, maybe, a reminder. Or maybe she'd panicked when she realized they weren't going to pull this off and thought the note would be some kind of twisted shield. I zoomed in on her expression. She looked lost. Not sorry. Not scared. Just lost. The official report followed shortly after. Officers confirmed that while no real money had been stolen, the case was part of a confidential business deal, and its unauthorized removal, with intent to misrepresent, could constitute attempted fraud. The motel manager had reported Brooke and Tom after noticing them acting jumpy and asking weird questions about security cameras. The manager apparently was ex-military. Of course he was. They weren't arrested in the technical sense, just detained while the contents of the case were examined. Once it was confirmed the bills were fake, the authorities couldn't book them on felony theft. But corporate fraud? Intent to deceive? Public misrepresentation tied to active business? That was a different story. Victor filed a motion to ensure the police report remained unsealed and public. That part was important. It meant their names, Brooke and Tom, would now be tied to a filed police investigation. No convictions, but searchable, traceable. A little digital stain they'd never scrub clean. I didn't need them jailed. I needed them exposed. That afternoon, I updated the investors. I was fully transparent, explained the theft, the fake cash, the trap, and the footage. One of the older guys, a retired commodities broker from New York, actually laughed. "You're telling me she tried to steal a prop case?" he said. "Hell, Elias. I should invest again just based on your nerve." Another investor offered to fly in and speak on my behalf at upcoming events, praising the risk-proofing built into our team's culture. I leaned into the narrative, told the story at a conference the next week, framed it as a case study on due diligence, system safeguards, and trust in business. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. The point was made. Back home, the lake house felt different. Lighter. I gathered the last of Brooke's forgotten things. A pair of earrings on the sink, a half-read paperback, some old receipts. I boxed them up, sealed them, and left them in the garage. She hadn't reached out. Not once. No calls. No texts. Not even a burner account. Maybe she was waiting to see how it all played out. Or maybe Tom had convinced her to lie low and let it blow over. Either way, it didn't matter. She made her choice. And it ended in a slush-covered parking lot. Her arms folded tight while police officers bagged the one thing she thought was going to change her life. The gift she stole wasn't what she thought it was. It wasn't a payday. It was a test. And now it was a trap she'd walked right into. There's something satisfying about watching people get caught in the exact trap they thought they were too smart to trigger. Room 214 was never meant to be anything more than a GPS dot on a screen. But somehow, it became the stage where everything unraveled for them. I didn't go down there myself. I didn't need to. The facts did the work. The photos, the footage, the trail they left behind. All of it pointed to one conclusion. They thought they were slipping away into a new life, when really, they were stepping right into the ending of the one they'd already burned. Tom was the first to fold. According to the officer's report, Victor sent me the full copy, annotated with yellow highlights like a school project. Tom got defensive the second they knocked on the door, claimed they had every right to be there, that the case belonged to him, that no one stole anything. But his tone changed fast once they opened the trunk and found my prop case wedged between a duffel bag and a cooler full of gas station snacks. Brooke, surprisingly, said almost nothing. When asked about the case, she claimed she didn't know what was inside. When they reminded her she had taken it from a private residence, she just looked down at the ground. Not a single denial. Not a word about misunderstanding. Just silence. That kind of silence that fills up a room and weighs more than shouting ever could. The officers confirmed the bills were fake after about 15 minutes of close inspection. That should have been the end of it. No real currency, no grand theft. But I'd done my homework. Brooke and Tom didn't just steal a flashy briefcase. They took proprietary materials tied to an active, high-value business deal. In legal terms, corporate intellectual property. And that meant consequences. They weren't booked. But the report was written, the footage was copied, the names were logged. Publicly, Victor filed a motion the same afternoon. Simple, clean, undeniable. He requested that the incident report be kept unsealed, citing demonstrated intent to misrepresent corporate assets for personal gain. Passed without question. There was no trial, no hearing. But from that point on, if anyone Googled their names, they'd find it. Not an accusation. A record. That's all I wanted. They weren't going to jail. But they weren't walking away untouched either. I got another photo a few hours later. This one from Victor's paralegal, who had gone to the station to retrieve a copy of the surveillance footage on our behalf. The image showed Tom sitting alone in the motel parking lot, elbows on his knees, hands laced together like he was trying to pray his way out of reality. His tie was crooked. His hair, which had been so perfectly styled every time I'd seen him before, was matted and damp. Brooke stood a few feet away, phone to her ear, probably trying to call someone. Anyone who could help. She didn't look angry. She looked ruined. The case sat between them on the pavement, opened like a casket, the fake bills fluttering in the wind. A small emblem on the interior flap read, "For demonstration purposes only." You had to look closely, but it was there. They never did. Later that night, I poured myself a glass of scotch and walked down to the dock behind the lake house. The snow had started to melt around the edges, revealing the edges of the frozen water beneath. The world was quiet, still. My breath hung in the air as I leaned on the railing and let it all settle in. I should have felt angry, but I didn't. I should have felt vindicated, but even that didn't quite land. What I felt, what I honestly hadn't expected, was release. Not relief, not victory, just release. The kind that comes when the truth is finally so loud, so undeniable, that you stop arguing with yourself about whether you were imagining it. The kind of clarity that comes only after you've let go of the idea that someone you love is still the person you remember. I don't think Brooke ever planned to stay gone. That's the part that stuck with me the most. I think she thought she could circle back, explain it away, spin some sob story about pressure or confusion. Maybe she figured Tom would help her vanish for a few weeks, and then, when things cooled off, she'd send a message asking to meet, just to talk. She probably thought I'd still be waiting, but the moment she stepped into that SUV, she stopped being my wife. And the second she handed over that case like it was hers to take, she stopped being someone I owed anything to. The justice that happened in room 214 wasn't about courtrooms or handcuffs. It was about exposure. It was about finally making sure the consequences showed up in the daylight. No more secrets. No more subtle manipulations. No more whispered excuses that made me question my own instincts. Everything they did, the exit, the theft, the plan, was now part of the public record. And the next time Tom tried to show a couple a nice lakefront property, he'd have to answer for it. The next time Brooke applied for a job at a financial institution, the hiring manager would see her name in a report tied to an attempted deception. That was justice enough for me. I didn't need to hear their apologies. I didn't need an explanation. The footage had already said more than they ever could. And yet, even with all of that closure, I found myself walking back into the house and looking at the last remnants of what our life had been. Photos on the walls, her coffee mug in the cabinet, a scarf still hanging on the coat rack. I picked it up, ran my hand over the fabric, and then tossed it in the donation pile by the door. It was time to start cleaning. That night I wrote a short note, not to her but to myself. Just a few lines. She took what she thought would break you. She didn't realize she was handing you your freedom. I folded the note, slipped it into the drawer of my nightstand, and turned out the light.